Hello, welcome back. Another live stream. This is Fred Wheeler, and I'm definitely going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons. It's a book review today. Doing a lot of book reviews right now. My suggestion to you is grab some food, some drink, get comfortable. There's a lot to talk about. This is an enormous book, and I have been wanting to talk about it for a long time, but it's taken me an extremely long time to actually process everything in it, to actually sort of understand what I was looking at, and to sort of feel like I had something to comment that was worthwhile listening to, which frankly I think half the time when you do a book review, particularly on this particular book, is it's hard to do so in a way that's going to be useful to you. So we're all good here at this end, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to run a poll. Obviously it's going to be around the book. That would make a lot of sense. I do not expect a lot of people to be particularly interested in this book. Why? I think primarily because it's not really the sort of thing that most people worry too much about. And for very good reason, frankly, because, is this a book you're going to use over and over again? Probably not. So, yeah, hence the problem of a book like this is like, where is the market for it? Other than for a collector book. And I think I've got my question ready and loaded. Book. Okay, all right. Made my question too long. Okay, there we go. Let's put this in and see if this works. All right, so the question's in. People have had a chance to jump into the room, and I am pretty much ready to do this. There will be a Q&A or questions and answers at the end of this for those of you who wanted do some asking questions. Unrelated, doesn't have to be about anything in particular, so don't worry about that sort of thing. Okay, let's go. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, because I usually do talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and certainly we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons spanning I would say the whole history of Dungeons and Dragons, because today I'm going to do a book review on Art and Arcana, the Dungeons and Dragons visual history. It's a book that's been out for a while, so I know for a lot of people you're probably wondering, why would I even bother at this present time, considering people have already talked about the book? Well, because hopefully I have something to add that they haven't been able to add. That's usually the reason for doing this sort of thing, and the reason for doing a book review is you get hopefully various perspectives. The book is still available for purchase. I'm not suggesting that you should buy it or that you shouldn't buy it. Frankly, I'm going to say it straight up right now, at the very beginning, before I say anything else about this book. And that is, this is a huge book. It's full of really interesting artwork, photos, and images. So is it going to be worthwhile to you purchasing? Well, frankly, you're probably going to go through it once, and that will be the end of it. And then it will sit on your shelf, taking up far too much space, and you'll never look at it again. So the reality is that as a usable book that you would reuse over time for the expense and the space it takes up, it actually doesn't make an awful lot of sense to purchase this. Yet I have this book and I know all of this, and I still like the book, and I still don't want to give it away to somebody, although I do feel like if you place it in the middle of a table, it's probably going to interest a lot of people, and they're probably going to flip through it while you're preparing for your game. So it is definitely not a purchase of any kind of book where it makes a lot of sense. That being said, I've got a lot of good things to say about this book. A lot of bad things, but a lot of good things as well. So we're going to go through them as best we can and cover as much of the details as I possibly can. And to give you an idea, I mean, this is sort of thing. This is a massive book. It's very thick. Somebody's gone to a lot of effort, considering the cost of the book and what's in here and the quality of the book. I mean, seriously, I don't even know how they made money. Perhaps they made quite a bit of money. We just don't understand how they managed to figure out how to market it and publish it or something like that. Frankly, I don't know all the ins and outs of these sorts of things. And I'm not expected to, hopefully. So, with no further ado, let us talk about this book and all of the things that make it good and bad. So Art and Arcana is a huge hard-covered book, as I just showed you. It's stitch-bound, which means glue's great, but stitch-bound means it's going to be solid. It's going to be able to survive significant time. It's been designed so that it will last a lifetime. There are about 440 thick, full-color, glossy pages in this thing. So even the interior of the book is made out of the best quality material you could possibly get hold of. The book's all about creating and developing Dungeons and Dragons art over more than about 40 years of the game. The creators is Michael Whitwer, Sam Whitwer. There's Kyle Newman. I don't know Kyle Newman very well. I haven't heard of him. The other two I have. And then there's a Dungeons and Dragons expert, John Peterson, who's done a very academic and very extensive book on Dungeons and Dragons and the history of role-play games. And so they have really got the best of everything. Everybody has a part to play. They've even included Joe Manganiello. He shares his love and experience of Dungeons and Dragons in the foreword. And they've even included a photo of Joe standing beside a painting done by a very famous artist. I can't remember exactly who it is. And it has his personal character, Arcana the Cruel. I think that's right. Arcana the Cruel is like a dragonborn who worships Tiamat. And this character pops up in Dungeons and Dragons Adventures. If you've been following Joe, you probably know about his character already. This collection of art is a visual story of the history of Dungeons and Dragons. It's art, all of the products associated with Dungeons and Dragons, all the advertising that was done, all the marketing, and all the rules. There is some depth going into some of the things that happened with rules. Very much at a conceptual level rather than at a specific level. Because, of course, it's supposed to be more about the art than the rules, right? There's a lot of remarkable and surprising marketing catalogs going right back. There's advertising posters, television commercials, and now I don't even know if I can get this right. Ephemera. It's basically little bits of paper and things and bits and bobs related to something. I don't know how else to put it. It's not a word that I usually use very often, so I don't really understand it that well. But it's in there. The evolution of specific iconic monster art and their style is, well, it's fascinating to actually see because you get it in one panel, or two panels, should I say, 2 pages. And it's fascinating to see how each artist builds on the past concepts that other artists have put forward. It's not like the newer artists are better than the older artists, because you've got to understand that the concept of those monsters changed over time and developed over time. And not only that, that techniques and resources and what they had available to them changed, and also the expense, the types of artists that they employed. Starting off with people who were being asked to do it for free as a favor, right through to professionals who were doing oil paintings. So the evolution of the artwork is going to be different. And I know some people will look on at the older art and just sort of like poo-poo it, but actually there's a reason why it's there, okay? It actually helped future art develop. Now, how the role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons survived multiple calamities is repeatedly stressed by the authors. I found this quite interesting because when you look at the history of Dungeons & Dragons, even through whether it's the rules or the art, it's always been on the precipice at times where the game might have just disappeared, which is probably one of the reasons why when we went from TSR to Wizards of the Coast and they made version 3, that they made it an open game license so that there was no risk if the company fell over, that the game would disappear, because it would always be out there for somebody to do something with, because there was no copyright restrictions on it, really. You were using there's a reason why the open game license exists. It was to ensure that Dungeons and Dragons survived many, many decades beyond Wizards of the Coast. And it will, because of 3.5. There's nothing that can be done about that. And I would say that the owner of Wizards of the Coast at that time is very much responsible for making that happen. Unheard of to do something like this, but not anymore, because it did actually happen. There's 700 images in this book, because the creators were given authorization to make a book with a certain number of images, and it just grew. I think they said it started with about 300 images and they added 400 images. So it more than doubled in size, this book, from the time that they put it forward to publishers, which I find amazing. Creators spared no expense in acquiring many large, high-resolution art pieces, and they are of the highest quality. They have a lot of the original art has got all of the logos and writing that was covering over the art. It's been removed so you can see it in its full glory, which I find remarkable. I've never actually experienced the full concept of some of those art pieces, and of course some of it was sort of cut out because it wouldn't fit onto a book cover or something like that, so you get the full scope of it, which is great. The authors of the book are clearly very passionate about Dungeons and Dragons, and they know a lot about the game as well. They have different skills to make this essentially a paperweight come together. And it is a pretty impressive paperweight, if you ask me. The original maps, well, there's a lot of them. So the original maps from famous old and new published adventures, including in some cases hand-drawn dungeons and locations, grace these pages. You actually see a lot of the old style maps, the newer style maps, and some of the hand-drawn maps that were done for some publications, and in some cases, I believe there are just a handful that are unrelated, that may be related to the original Greyhawk game or the original Blackmoor game. So, quite cool. Now, when I say Blackmoor and Greyhawk, I mean the first play testers of Dungeons and Dragons before it was published, before it was actually put into book form. There are early character sheets from the original playtesters, part of the Blackmoor and Greyhawk gaming groups, that show how original Dungeons and Dragons had a raw nature to it. I mean, it was very amateurist, and there's an amateur feel to the whole thing, but they're working towards something else, and you can see where it comes from by seeing those character sheets. It's the sort of thing that you would do yourself if you didn't go and print it out and you didn't have a character sheet because you couldn't buy it or find it on the internet because there's no internet. You would just draw it up yourself. It's that sort of thing. Many photos of important Dungeons and Dragons people playing tabletop war games are in here, like Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson, establishing sort of the creators' gaming roots, because they originally were tabletop war gamers, playing, I guess, reproductions of older wars that had taken place. And then, of course, from there was the rebellion into doing the role-playing aspect of things rather than playing out large battles. And, of course, the tabletop miniature wargaming aspect kind of disappeared, and you got Dungeons and Dragons, the role-play game. There's an array of images of different Dungeons and Dragons products, toys, board games, books, video games as well. It shows the expansion of the brand, and the expansion of the brand was clearly happening from the very get-go. Only a couple of years into this whole thing, they were really starting to shift how they marketed Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't just a role-playing game anymore. There's a lot more going on. The descriptions of the history of how Dungeons and Dragons art developed, and it's interesting, and I really found it compelling to read. It's well researched because I've read other stuff as well, so I kind of know that they've got a lot of the facts right, and Peterson knows what he's talking about, and it's comprehensive. So there's really everything there, certainly with regard to the different artists and what was going on. And by far the most interesting aspects are the early years, where people aren't getting paid, where they're just doing art for Gary as a favor because, you know, they had some artistic skills. Now, one of the things I did notice when I was reading through this book, and that is the artist's tone of writing and their perspective in the early years is as objective as possible, I think. I think it's pretty objective what they portray. But clearly, it shifts when they start talking about Wizards of the Coast once Wizards of the Coast has ownership of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, why is that? Well, I think that's probably because a lot of the archived artwork, photos and images, but specifically artwork and images, are held by Wizards of the Coast. So you can't really paint in a bad way any decisions or things that Wizards of the Coast did if you want to get the artwork from them. So once you get to a point where they start talking about Wizards of the Coast rather than TSR, you will see a tonal change. So a lot of that stuff that's written there is not very useful to you. It's more generic and broad, not quite as interesting as the stuff originally that you'd see, because all the warts were being shown originally, and then of course you see they play a lot of that down once Wizards of the Coast is owning it, because of course Wizards of the Coast doesn't have to give them all those archived resources for their book. So I think that's why the authors have done that. There's a lot of Dungeons and Dragons stuff never seen by the public before, and it's kind of mind-blowing. It's almost as if they're lost or long-lost artifacts and documentation and scrolls that somebody's found. It's quite amusing how it's presented, and I was surprised the sorts of things they included in here. There are vintage pictures of Dungeons and Dragons video games, the cover art for them, including talking about and showing off some of the massive multiplayer online games. And it shows how gaming changed. Over time, we started with pen and pencil. You see the transition into video games early on, which was, they're not complicated. They're very simple in their graphics and how they work because of the nature of technology at the time, over to what became more complicated, more involved, more advanced. Some of the larger art pieces cross 2 pages. They go over 2 pages, and it makes it hard to see them clearly, particularly when they join in the spine. And I found that a little frustrating at times. I understand that they wanted to try to give you the biggest scope, and the biggest scope is to try to go over 2 pages rather than trying to put it onto 1 page and reduce it down in size, particularly since they've gone to all this effort to try to get large-scale images in the highest resolution they possibly could. The many Dungeons and Dragons references in pop culture are talked about, with its impact on television and movies over the past 4 decades, confirming what I believe to be the mainstream appeal of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, it may not have started that way, but it is clear that with all of the references in television and movies, particularly television and other pop culture, Dungeons and Dragons is heading into mainstream appeal. Whether you like that or not is sort of beside the point. That's where it's going. And I believe that is probably what Gary wanted to have happen. I'm very much sure, based on reading some of the information on him, that he was much more interested in seeing it being a broadly appealing IP rather than being just restricted to nerd culture only. Dave Arneson, I'm not too sure, but Dave Arneson is very much... look, Dave Arneson, who's co-creator with Gary Gygax, and certainly very much responsible for its early development and its even conception, I would say is probably more than happy with that as well. Now, why is that? I would say because he used to teach gaming, how to game design, how to make computer programs, stuff like that. So I don't think he would be upset in the slightest. I think it's heading in the right direction in some respects. There are landscape-style photos of public celebrity games. Now, there's a lot of celebrities who play Dungeons & Dragons, so they have some photos of those. Some of the game conventions that took place, including Gen Con, and it demonstrates the large-scale organised Dungeons & Dragons events, where people in large numbers would get together and play this game together, often with a common outcome involved. And I know a lot of the current organised group play have what is called the epics, and they don't have pictures of that sort of thing there. But it is obvious that organised play and big events is a thing that's been going on for a long time, and it's still going on, and hopefully once we get through everything, it will continue. All the cover art for the three core rule books. There's 3 core rule books from the very get-go, and they give you the cover art for all 3 core rule books from the first printing of Dungeons & Dragons through to Dungeons & Dragons 5e, our current version. And it's displayed in sort of a dramatic glory. It covers like 2 pages. And it's amazing to watch the different covers and how they changed over time. Even when they reprinted books and decided to change the cover art for various reasons. All of the, well, I wouldn't say all, but a lot of the Dungeons & Dragons illustrators and artists get mentioned in this book with their influence on the game, because you have to admit that a lot of the artwork told the story to dungeon masters and players as to what they were playing in terms of a game. And the artists and how they portrayed things in the artwork, their influence on the game and people's perception of the game is really what made it work. It's not really the rules, and it really wasn't this open role play experience or guide. It was very much the artwork that was telling a lot of the story. And then, of course, on top of that, then we were using our own imagination. So I'm really happy that they actually do talk about the different artists, their impact on Dungeons & Dragons, and what they were involved with, because they do. The original polyhedral Dungeons & Dragons dice, those funny different-sided dice that we're talking about, now the original dice are actually in there. This is the crayon-filled dice that you would get. They're shown as if they are some sort of artifact from ancient Rome, and as we all know, they're actually 20-sided dice from ancient Rome. They used those sorts of dice earlier than just Dungeons and Dragons. It just wasn't a common type of dice. It was a rare type of dice to use usually. And then I believe the printing and manufacture of that type of dice is what kind of drove Gary to sort of include them, because they were easy to access and they would make things stand out, and it changed the random nature of the game. So including different sided dice was a good thing, right? Rather than just using a cube or the 6-sided dice. The much loved Dungeons & Dragons magazines are talked about and discussed. That's Dragon and Dungeon, which of course some of you may not be aware of. They did exist at one point. They have the art panels with a wide range of exotic covers, while explaining the effect they had on the gaming community. And look, one of the things that was really important early on for any kind of gaming, whether it be tabletop wargaming or Dungeons & Dragons, was the zine or magazines that you could put out, the amateur magazines and the professional. And Dragon and Dungeon did that. Now we have a thing called, I believe it, is it Dragon Talk or Dragon Plus? Something I find almost useless, frankly. Wizards of the Coast's use of that particular online magazine, there's nothing in there other than just blabber. You actually got useful stuff in Dungeon and Dragon, these two different magazines that were put out. So it's a shame that they're not around anymore, but we do have people doing their own thing now. The beginning, the development, the transformation, and the manufacturing of fantasy miniatures sort of provides evidence of how they shape Dungeons and Dragons as a gaming hobby, because originally they weren't that impactful, they weren't necessary for play, they weren't often used. It's only later on, often people were using beads rather than miniatures, because you couldn't buy miniatures, Dungeons and Dragons miniatures, or even fantasy miniatures. That actually came later on, and obviously Games Workshop and is it Palratha? I think it's Palratha, were one of the bigger manufacturers early on. The Satanic Panic's public hysteria is explored with sort of some news clippings and references to sort of the misunderstood perception of the game of Dungeons and Dragons and the experience that Dungeons and Dragons went through because of this hysteria around, things that people assumed were taking place, which spawned things like the movie Mazes and Monsters and bothered about Dungeons and Dragons, sort of a group of people who got together who didn't like the game because they believed that it was about worshipping the devil. I like the fact that they have included this in here, because it doesn't just give you art, it gives you sort of the story. It really does give you the story of what was taking place with the game. And it's also look, let's get real. If we didn't have the Satanic Panic, it probably wouldn't be as popular as it is now. It probably would. It may well have fallen away, and people may not have picked it up. Or maybe something else would have happened that would have brought it forward. Who knows? The various Dungeons and Dragons digital online tools illustrate the struggle that the game designers experienced marketing and developing quality software. And I suppose you could say they are still struggling with that concept, because Wizards of the Coast and or Hasbro, both of them, still struggling with this concept. They're doing better with video games, but there are still people out there or publishers doing better than Wizards of the Coast at putting out high quality fantasy video games. Now, the tools that you use, as we know, most of the tools aren't put out by Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro. And this is a battle they have been fighting from the very get-go. It's amazing how some of the early tools, digital tools they put out, were really advanced, but too advanced for their time. Entertaining, but also quite amusing, considering now that they struggle with the whole thing. There are rare doodling gems that hammer home the artist's humour and view of TSR developing the sort of child-friendly policies. Now, they didn't have child-friendly policies to begin with, but like many corporations and companies, they develop over time, and certainly it was a response to the Satanic Panic, but it was clear that artists didn't like this particular shift. And I find it amusing that way we are actually, TSR did it, and now Wizards of the Coast is heading in that direction. And I'm all for kids being involved in Dungeons and Dragons, but you can't have the same game for kids and for adults. It just doesn't work, or teenagers. You do have to differentiate the art and the style and theme and tone of things. And Wizards of the Coast will very well wind up making exactly the same mistake that TSR did. Wizards of the Coast, TSR, they're going to be forming their own little pool of errors. As we look back at this 10 years from now, it may be quite amusing to see the pattern, the cycle, it just rotates. It's like being in the Matrix. The Dungeons and Dragons comic book art legacy indicates sort of the diversity of products that it's always existed, pretty much from the very get-go. And I think also there's a lot of little humorous comic strips in there that sort of show the iconic concepts of Dungeons and Dragons and also the deadly nature, particularly of some of the early adventures. And I actually find them even more entertaining looking at how people view them. When you get a cartoonist and you get them to say, can you say something about Dungeons and Dragons? There are so many things that you can poke fun at. It's wonderful. And this is actually included in the book. You'll get some of this here. Famous Dungeons and Dragons adventure covers, art, interior illustrations that were used as player handouts are presented from its inception right through to public publications. They even have the handouts that were used when they were running the Tomb of Horrors, a very famous adventure that's extremely deadly, to try and standardize the game when they were running it as a public event. And so those handouts are actually in this book, which I find refreshing. It's interesting that you would use this sort of concept, a handout, to try and standardize a public game where multiple tables are trying to play through the same experience. Do we still see that sort of thing? We kind of still do, but this was probably the first time it was ever done. And it's nice to see that included in the book. The different campaign setting art styles that sort of built the wide range of Dungeons and Dragons worlds and eventually bankrupt TSR is astounding. I mean, seriously, the number of different campaign worlds that were put out is just astronomical. You think about what was there. And I when I look at this, I think, well, there's a point where it's probably best to make products that are more world agnostic so that you can place adventures into Eberron or the Forgotten Realms or Dark Sun, maybe a bit harder to do, or your own homebrew world. And now that we are seeing Wizards of the Coast going through the process of releasing more campaign books, I'm kind of wondering myself, since this bankrupt TSR, is this actually going to be a problem for Wizards of the Coast? Because it's clear from the number of different worlds and campaign settings that were put out and the kinds of art they had to work on, that it might actually be a mistake, which I kind of find frustrating because I want different worlds, but I know I'm not going to be interested in everything they put out. So, yeah. Maybe there's a place for them to actually make something that's just a toolbox for making your own worlds, where pretty much everybody's going to buy that because they can do whatever they want with it. But that's in here. Then we also get sort of the breaking of copyright law is in there. Certainly the breaking of copyright law with early Dungeons and Dragons artwork copied by teenage artists. It proves to be quite amusing, and you get a side-by-side comparison. What I love about this is that a lot of these teenagers were not getting paid, or if they were getting paid, they were not getting paid very much. And so they had to put this stuff together quickly. And also, too, it's a teenager, so what is a teenager going to do? They're going to break copyright law. They've got a whole lot of comic books sitting around, and so things like the Avengers, Nick Fury, and Doctor Strange wind up being used. Look, some of the stuff looks like it might have actually been traced, and then they've just taken out the gun or whatever was held, and taken out sort of the any aspect that sort of suggests that it's from a modern age, and made it more sort of fantasy medieval in style. So it is amusing to see this, and I mean, should have been quite predictable. I would imagine that Gary Gygax he probably wouldn't have been aware that it was taking place too much later on, which is probably why they wound up in court later on around these sorts of things. Although copyright law was not quite as strict in the past as it is now. So yeah, but it is fun to see. Now, the impact of Rockstar Dungeons and Dragons live streams game sessions from Critical Role. It's in here. It shows how it fanned the success of Dungeons and Dragons, and I agree. I think it certainly has, resulting in the expansion of the Dungeons and Dragons community. There are a lot of people out there who play Dungeons and Dragons because of Critical Role, and so we have a lot to thank Critical Role for that. And what I found amusing is there's an image in here of them pretending to be teenagers sitting around a table, and it's kind of like a bit of a piss take on older advertising that had teenagers sitting around a table playing this game, because this was sort of the market, was teenagers and young adults. That was the market for Dungeons and Dragons. They were the ones who were playing this game, and so that's how they marketed it. And it's fun to see that Critical Role understands a lot of the history. Certainly, I think, I don't know about everybody, but I do understand that Matthew Mercer does and understand quite a bit of what took place with the history of Dungeons and Dragons. I wouldn't be surprised that he probably knows far more than anybody realizes. Anyway, it was good to see that. And then the book, I'm shocked. Look, even if you don't like this book, I'm going to say it now. This book has a complete index. This index is extensive. It has an extensive acknowledgement of everybody who contributed to this book. And it puts Wizards of the Coast to shame in terms of their books and the kinds of things they produce, because the acknowledgements and the index take up pages. It is all there. If you want to find anything in this book, you can find it with this index. It's going to be in there. You don't have to flip through all 440 pages to find anything. You just go to the index, you look up what you're looking for, you find it, and you go straight to that page. And look, the authors and publishers of this book should be commended for the fact that they've actually made a reference, resource, and art book that is easy to actually use. If you really wanted to go back and find something specific, you can. And I was really impressed by that. Now, I've kind of already said what my opinion is of this book. I want to just say, look, I wouldn't change the fact that I purchased the book. For the money that I spent and the quality of the book and the size of the book, it's really good. But let's get real. You're not going to use it. There's no adventures in here that you can run. It's not like you're going to reread this. Now, it is a book that you could put on your table and say to players, look, if you want to have a look through it, just leave it on your table and the players will probably flip through it. They may want to borrow it from you. The problem with people borrowing books is they don't always return them, right? But I think you'll find that even if you don't lend the book to somebody, by putting it out on the table, you're going to get not just you enjoying it, but all of your group experiencing a lot of the history of the game through this book and the kinds of different artwork that was put out. And after seeing this, I realize I miss Brom and a lot of the early artists like Larry Elmore. And there are many more, Otis and so forth. A lot of the artwork that we just don't see that kind of art anymore. It's kind of like a mishmash of watercolor, digital creations, and sort of a cartoony look. And it's all right, but it's obviously appealing to a teenage audience. And it is nice to see some of the original works that were put out. And I will keep the book. And I will probably, if we ever play again in person, I will probably let my players and the people who play in my group look through it as much as they like, because it's pretty impressive. And I learned a lot reading this book and looking at all the stuff. I learned so much about the game that I love. Now, I'm hoping that this was useful to you in some way. I don't know that it necessarily would be. It is, I guess, more useful to somebody who's interested in the history and the nature of what took place with Dungeons and Dragons. And if that's not sort of your bag, then this won't be any use to you. But if it was, great. Look, if you enjoyed this, I have hundreds of videos for players and Dungeon Masters covering every aspect of Dungeons and Dragons 5e, and other role-play games in a general sense. And you're welcome to go and check those out. Now, if you want to support the channel so I keep doing video content like this, you can through Patreon, the Amazon affiliate links down in the description, the merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos, or just watch my videos, that's fine too. Make sure to do the usual YouTube things like share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, don't go away. It is Q&A time, and you are welcome to ask any question you like. It is not a problem. So, hashtag question's a good idea. Just in case I missed you, I think I will need my eyes today. Now, I know a few of you are probably saying, well, it's a book review. Why am I not showing you what's in the book? Because I will flip through the book and do a voiceover, and I will release that as an edited version. Whereas I think the format that I'm doing right now is more about telling you what I think of the book, right? Rather than showing you. Hello, Wally. Hello, Joe. And I see that, yeah. And so as our poll indicates, Art and Arcana is a huge Dungeons and Dragons book. Do you really want this on your bookshelf? So 64% said yes, 18% no, totally understand. Undecided, 18%. Okay, so that's only 11 votes, but based on that, I did not expect a lot of people to show up for this. It makes perfect sense. So by all means, if you have any questions, doesn't have to be about this, can be about something else. I'll just put hashtag question in so I don't miss anybody, just in case. Hashtag question, please. Just quickly, so that people understand where my head's at with all of this, is that I did this book review not because I'm trying to sell the book, okay? Because it's too late for that, frankly. If you were going to buy the book, you would have done it ages ago. This was more for me. I hate to say it, it's more for me. Because I learned so much about this. I need to put this in. I've got a Dungeon Master round table today, and I don't want to lose my voice. Hey, Wally, it just occurred to me before I go through the chat, do you want to jump into the Zoom room with me, Sarah, and Taryn, and Jordan today, just before we start off? Now, my reason for saying this, Wally, is one, it gives you a chance to meet Sarah, and I want her to meet you as early as possible. It also means you get a chance to meet Indostructo Boy, and I don't know when I'm going to get Indostructo Boy back. I don't know how easy it is going to be to grab hold of him. So I would like you to be able to meet him, at least talk initially in the setup time with him. I guess that's where my head's at. If you can't do it, I know you put yourself down as an emergency stand-up or standby, but I feel like it would be a good opportunity. And maybe months before I can link you up with them. Yeah. Just an idea, buddy. Okay, right, here we go. Philippe Hull. Larry Elmore was my first glance at D&D and sold me to get a copy. Now, I have an art book by Larry Elmore, by the way. Now, I would show that book to you and talk about that book by all means. But I don't know that art books and talking about Dungeons and Dragons art and fantasy art is necessarily something that people are terribly interested in. So I'm always sort of reluctant to do it. And I don't even know if you could buy that book anymore. So I'd probably be showing you a whole lot of stuff that you could never grab hold of, even if you wanted to. But you'll let me know if that sort of interests you. This is not really what I normally do. Normally, if I do a book review, it's on something that's useful to you. And this is more like an education on Dungeons and Dragons rather than ongoing usefulness. Do you know what I mean? Dick's Bumpkin, how's it going? I get a lot of inspiration from visuals. Yeah, I do too. So the book is a must-have for me. Really? Okay. All right. Oh, that's good to know. Especially with the D&D source material in it. Yeah, I think when I looked at some of the original artwork, it reminded me why I like the idea of Dark Sun and some of the older settings. I understand why players don't like it, but I understand why I like it. And also the influence. I think it's because Dark Sun is very much been influenced by Conan the Barbarian. And I mean, let's get real. The likes of John Carter and the Mars series by Edgar Rice Burroughs and Howard, who did Conan. I mean, they are some of the best fantasy novels out there. The very early ones. I mean, H.G. Wells, obviously, but in terms of fantasy, they were right out there. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are also good, but they're a very different nature. And so, yeah, I still enjoy that aspect of it being displayed in the artwork. You're so tempted to get it? Yeah, retro art is the best. Look, if you're not convinced, that's fine. I think it's probably quite silly to have a book of this size on your bookshelf that you're probably not going to use that often. I will do a flip through of the book and like I said, a voiceover. So if you want to wait for that, then by all means do that. That's fine. Whale's Bloody Pimple. Stop reading notes. We want to hear off the cuff. Well, I do a little bit. So here's the thing. Whales, I read off my notes so that I remind myself what I wanted to say. Now, off the cuff, you get a little bit of off the cuff. So this is how I do my live streams nowadays. I read out what I needed to remind myself to say. And then I add in a bit of off the cuff to expand on it. And I mean, if that doesn't feel natural enough to you, I think what you're trying to get me to do is beyond my skill. Frankly, I don't think anybody could do it. To be able to talk to a book like this without using notes would be, frankly, impossible for anybody. I don't think anybody would be capable. Okay? So I totally understand reading off the notes feels artificial, but I got to have notes, and I'm not going to stop doing that. And if that's enough that you decide you don't want to watch, then see you later. Okay? I'm not going to be nasty about it, but you got to be reasonable. Okay, Philip, what do you got here? Oh, thank you, Raul Partha. I knew I had it back to front, didn't I? It's been a while. I haven't used those miniatures for so long. So what do you got here, Wally? I always dig D&D history, but not sure if I'll pick up this book. Yeah, exactly. And considering how much research you did recently, Wally, it may not make any sense, right? I tend to stay more with books that I can use, exactly, and derive ideas from. And my bookshelf is filling up fast. Yes, so is mine. I actually have to get something off my bookshelf to make space for new books, because there isn't enough space anymore. Hi Joe, Overboard DM. Now, for those of you who don't know, Wally DM has a channel, a YouTube channel, deals in puzzles, traps. You should go and check him out. He's part of the Dungeon Master Roundtable. We talk about all sorts of things, and you should go and check him out. Overboard DM does miniatures, terrain, Dwarven Forge, a lot of that, a lot of reviews. You should go and check him out as well. Not right now, but later on. Okay, next. Wally, what do you got here? Wizards of the Coast has already started using art for both Magic the Gathering cards and for D&D books. Yeah. Now, I like a lot of the Magic the Gathering artwork. If you look at the expanse that they have, it's great. It is not too cartoony, so I'm kind of happy with that. It's got a very sort of, I guess, what's the word it's got a very clean look. It's not dirty and messed up. It doesn't have sort of a rough, realistic, or, I mean, not that we're dealing with realism really, are we? It's not like Dungeons and Dragons about reality, but it doesn't have that rough sort of deadly feel to it. I mean, some of the artwork is pretty dark, though. Certainly in Estrad, there's a lot of very dark artwork. I think they'll continue to multi-purpose art like this going forward. Well, yeah, Wally, I think you're right. I think that Wizards of the Coast will use a lot of the existing art from Magic the Gathering. Now, if you haven't figured it out, I use Magic the Gathering art for my thumbnails for videos that I put out. Wizards of the Coast does not put out enough artwork on Dungeons and Dragons to keep up with the video content that I put out. It just isn't possible, right? So I have to get my art from somewhere. And rather than getting it from people who are drawing stuff that's an IP and it's fan art, which you can do, I try to use artwork wherever possible. That is Wizards of the Coast or Paizo, primarily because really I'm promoting their brand. So it's never going to be, I'm not going to have to deal with copyright issues putting them into a thumbnail or into a video, because I'm using it in a manner which is falls within the guidelines of reuse of material. It makes sense. I'm promoting their brand, so it's not sort of taking away anything from them. If anything, it's broadening its appeal, hopefully. Philip, the Dragonlance novels and art really made me fall in love with D&D. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's because there was so many dragons in it. I mean, the reality is, when you put a lot of dragons into artwork, that changes everything. It makes it quite clear what you're dealing with. Camille, hello Camille, how's it going? Wally, Theatre of the Mind, yeah, book review. This is a Theatre of the Mind book review. And if you wanted to see the actual book, that will come in the future. I just don't know. It'll take a while. Right now, my house is so busy, I haven't been able to do any voiceovers at all. It has just not been possible. But I have been recording the flip-throughs. I just need to put the voiceovers on a couple of things. I think Larry Elmore's Alina, yep, versus Bargle in the Red Box is probably my favourite nostalgia piece. Yeah, and I had no idea. I found the piece. I was not aware that there were 3 different adventurers facing off against this red dragon. It's not until you see the full piece of artwork that you realize what's going on. Okay, Joe, what do you got here? I wanted the limited edition version just because I love the way it looks, and it will look good with other books. Oh, okay, all right. I actually like the standard version myself. I'm quite happy with that. Oh, Camille, what's with Discord? Okay, so for those of you who are here, why have I got a Discord? It's not for reasons that other people do. So anybody else who's got a Discord, my Discord is done a very specific way and for a very specific purpose. I've had it for years. I told nobody about my Discord. I never used it. And then I met a person called Eric from Fry Minis, and he used his Discord to do video chat and voice chat with people who was following him on his channel. So I do that. So you can actually come and talk to me in voice chat or in video chat, because you will see me on camera in Discord every week. And I do it from usually about 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. New Zealand time, New Zealand Daylight Time or New Zealand Standard Time, depending on whether we've got daylight or standard time going. And I do that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Okay? So the reason the Discord exists is not for anything else. All the other channel stuff there that you've got, that you use Discord for, that's not what it's there for. It's so that you can come and talk to me personally about whatever you want to talk about. That's why there's a Discord. So if you join it because you want to come and talk to me. If that's not really what you're there for, then don't bother. You know, just watch the videos. So yeah, the Discord there is primarily to chat with me. Okay, Wally, sure thing. I can pop in for a few minutes. What time? We are starting at where we should be opening up about 1:30 New Zealand Standard Time, or New Zealand Daylight Time, which is half an hour before our official meeting time. So the meeting time's 2 p.m. For you, you're in Central Standard Time age, Wally. So that'll be, the meeting would start at 7. So if you jump in at about 6:30 p.m. if you're available and not still eating dinner, that would be, you know, sometime between 6:30 p.m. and 7 p.m. in your time zone, Wally. That would be the best way to go. Cool. Hey, good, awesome. I'm looking forward to that. I'm probably going to scare Sarah. That's her name, Sarah. Okay, Philippe. Oh yes, Dark Sun, Boris Vigio. Vigio. I never could pronounce that surname. Boris is easy. Vigio, spelling, yes. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his surname. I'm sure I'll get it wrong. Julie Bell is his wife, and she does some pretty impressive fantasy art as well. I don't know if she ever did anything for Dungeons and Dragons, though. I don't know if Julie Bell did anything for that. I was surprised. I didn't realize they had married. Frank, yep. Frank Fritzer? I don't know. Brom. Yeah, Brom. Look, Brom is... See, artists, they would select an artist, and they would draw and paint everything for a campaign setting. So that campaign setting has the theme, style, and atmosphere of that artist. Now, everything that we see is pretty much exactly the same. Does that make sense? Like everything you see is like, it is exactly. Oh, thank you, Pale Rider. What do you got here? Vallejo. You know, right, so everybody, okay, so Philippe says Vallejo. Right, so here's the thing. I'm going to struggle with this because let's remember, pronunciation of a word differs in North America and then everywhere else in the world, okay? Because North Americans are using different phonetics and different spelling. And on top of that, I'm sure the pronunciation of his name is not Oxford pronunciation. I think it'll probably be very, very different. I'm suspecting Philippe is probably more, I'm just guessing Philippe is more familiar with the pronunciation, but I don't know. So if I get it wrong, I get it wrong. Oh, Vallejo. I'm going to struggle. I got something in my head. Don't worry about it. Yeah, you can laugh, man. I've got a lozenge in my mouth so I don't lose my voice. So I'm struggling right now to say anything. Pale Rider. Fred. I know. Yeah, missed me. Did I miss you, Pale Rider? Sorry. I didn't mean to miss you. I think it's when I start the stream and I look back at it, all of the comments that were early on get sort of lost. Yeah, I think it is nice. It's nice to I'm not reading that out. I'm not reading that out. It's funny, but I'm not reading it out. Oh dear. Oh, very good. Perfect. Okay. All right. Look, if there's anything else you want to ask and talk about, now is the time. Otherwise, I'm going to take this opportunity to disappear and prepare. Sarah asked 7 questions. I have prepared for 4 of those questions. I very much doubt that I will get through more than 4 questions. There's 4 of us in the panel. It takes time to answer those questions. It's going to be interesting. So Sarah is Sara, the hype goblin, and I'm really looking forward to you seeing what Sarah does, because I asked Sarah some very difficult questions in a live stream, and the answers I got were right on point and then went another step beyond what I was expecting. I haven't really seen anybody as good as Sarah, apart from maybe, yeah, I think even Trevor, No Fun Allowed, isn't. I mean, Trevor is always very good at doing things off the cuff. And AJ Pickett. But Sarah's another level again. I was actually really surprised. I don't really normally bring people in who are that I really haven't followed that much. But when I saw her in this live stream, I thought this is the perfect time. Just so I'm sure you're going to be interested in what is to come. Yeah. I was late to the stream. I just meant, missed my presence. No. I didn't miss you. I know you left a comment before the stream. I did read it. Okay, so what am I doing next week? I suppose I should tell you what I'm doing next week. There's 2 things I might wind up doing. I don't know which one it's going to be. I might talk about Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and the Dungeon Master tools in there, because I haven't really talked about them in terms of a review. It would be a book review for Dungeon Masters on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which frankly I don't feel is a Dungeon Master book. So I'm thinking of talking about that. There's another thing I might consider talking about, and that is Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. Fizban's Treasury of Dragons is a very peculiar book. It has things in it that I really like, and things in it that annoy me quite a lot. So it's going to be, I would probably, if I talk about Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, I'm going to talk about the player option stuff first, so it would be a player review rather than a Dungeon Master review. Okay, that'll come later. I just feel like that some of these books, there's too much to talk about, and I can't do them in a timely manner. So it's much more sensible to break them up. And there's another reason I'm doing it, and that is to maximize the amount of time that I spend under a tree on my days off while it's still summer at the beach. Is that a good reason for the way I have put my material for live streaming together? Probably not for you, but it is for me. So, you never know. I mean, we could wind up with serious problems here in New Zealand and not be able to go to the beach. So I'm going to take advantage of it while I can, which means you're going to get a lot of book reviews. And then after that, you're going to get a lot of stuff you've probably never seen on any channel ever. I've been building up to it for a while now. Okay. I think we've covered everything that we needed to. So I am going to take this opportunity to thank everybody. Thank you to my patrons for supporting me. Thank you for everybody who has been watching my live streams and my videos. I do appreciate it. Certainly, the more you show up to a live stream and you watch my live streams, the more likely I will continue doing them, because I know that they are working. Okay, so if you keep supporting them, I keep doing them. I don't expect you to watch the whole thing anyway. Beside all of that, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, or the wee early morning. Please look after yourself, your family, your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Hello, yellow. Yes, I can believe. Yes, it would be summer in Florida all the time.